I mentioned it in passing on last evening. I think I need to say it again today because oftentimes we think flesh is adultery, fornication, heresy, and all kinds of debauchery. That's not flesh. Those are the works of the flesh. Let's go to what flesh really is in Philippians chapter 3. Then we're going to get into some leadership realities. In Philippians chapter 3, the Apostle Paul, notice the first word in that particular chapter is finally. He says, now if you don't get anything else I said, you better get this. Finally, my brother, rejoice in the Lord. That's the priority. That's the prerequisite for all the benefits forthcoming. Rejoice in the Lord. He says to write the same thing to you, to me, indeed, is not grievous, but for you it is safe. In other words, I wrote to you before. I'm writing to you again. I'm saying the same thing I said the last time I wrote to you. We just don't have that epistle. We don't have a lot of epistles that were written by God's servants. So when people tell me this the Bible, this is all God ever said, I say, you know, you ought to not say that too loud. Somebody might hear you. Somebody might hear you. You know, even in the book of, in the Colossians letter, he says, let me just keep your finger there and switch over to Colossians chapter 4. You know what he says in verse 16? In Colossians chapter 4, verse 16, he says, and when this epistle is read among you, cause that it be read also in the church of the Laodiceans, and that ye likewise read the epistle from Laodicea. In other words, they're sister epistles. And you need both of them to understand what I'm saying to both of them. But we don't have the epistle to the Laodiceans that we wrote by Paul. So we have to get it in the spirit. We have to get it in the spirit to understand what he was saying to the church of Colossae. And there's other indicators that we just don't have. As a matter of fact, I think it was Luke that was writing to Theophilus and said, because many folk have taken in hand to write concerning Jesus Christ, I thought I'd do the same thing. So what I did, I became a historian. I started collecting all these gospels, all these epistles, all this information. Because I wanted to do the same thing and write and honor you, O Theophilus, and let you know how it all started. That's why his genealogy of Christ goes all the way back to Adam. He said, I searched it out, went to the Old Testament, went to those that saw Christ, etc., 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 put it all together. Now you can see that God became a man. My goodness. But back in Philippians chapter 3, dealing with flesh, now some people may get discouraged when they find out what flesh really is. Because some people put a lot of stock in flesh. Verse 2 of Philippians 3 says, beware of dogs, beware of evil workers, beware of the concision. Beware of the concision is beware of religious folks. They're the most dangerous people on the planet. Muslims are religious folk. They'll blow you up and your mama. And the Jews are religious folks. For we, the believers, are the circumcision which worship God in the Spirit and rejoice in Christ Jesus and have no confidence in the flesh. Though I might also have confidence in the flesh. If any other man thinketh that he hath whereof he might trust in the flesh, I more. Now, Paul is really laying it out. He says, now, just for the record, if anybody think their flesh is worth celebrating, my flesh is more celebratory than anyone else's flesh. Because I have the top dog flesh. So I'm going to shut you down right now. You think your flesh is something. My flesh is better than your flesh. Isn't that something? If anybody thinks he has whereof that he can trust, he says, I more. I have more going in my flesh than you do, whoever you might be. He says, here's flesh right here. How about it? Verse 5. Circumcised the 8th day. You know, most boys that get circumcised now is after the first day. And that's against the rule. That's against God's rule. Circumcising a child the first day. It's supposed to wait till the 8th day, when his blood coagulates, so he won't suffer as much. He won't bleed as much. But people don't care about children nowadays. The doctor comes through and says, line them all up, line them all. Just cut them as you go down the line. He says, my parents obeyed God and waited for the 8th day to circumcise. But he said, that's flesh. Then he says, of the stock of Israel, that's nationality. So whatever nationality we were born into is flesh. Of the tribe of Benjamin, that's family pedigree. You know, people go to family reunions every year and they have a little tree, they have all the names and everything. He said, that's flesh. If you have confidence in that, you're in the flesh. Then he says, a Hebrew of the Hebrews. I'm not mixed, I'm not African American. African and American, this and that, and so forth. I'm thoroughbred. No mixture. You can trace my pedigree all the way back. But it's still flesh. As touching the law, a Pharisee. What is this? That's class. I'm the top dog in the community, in society. When I walk the street, people look at me. I'm a Pharisee, you see. I'm not a Sadducee, you see. I'm a Pharisee. I'm fair to look upon. I'm somebody. But that's all flesh. So some people believe that they're upper class, upper middle class, low class, no class. Classism is all flesh. So we have to be really watch that real carefully, because some people live in what they call the hood. They feel like they don't have it going on. Some people live in what is called behind the gated community. They have it going on. But I'm writing a book that deals with the sophisticated ghettos of gated communities. And I'm tracing all the history of ghettos. And people buy $1 million homes and they don't realize they've just gotten into a ghetto. It's hard to get into, it's hard to get out of it. And it's limited to those that are bad. They're living a substandard life and paying big dollar for it. I'd rather live in the hood and bring the neighbors on back into it so we have a neighborhood. Oh, I don't mean to get off into something. Because we lived in the nice communities before, and I found out what they were all about. The colonial 3 stories and all that stuff had going on. God says, give it all up. Go right to the hood. Where the boom boxes are going. We never want to walk the street. Get out there when they were cussing and carrying on and rapping and cussing and on. Get right in the middle of it. God. Okay, well, sin abound, grace much more abound. In other words, I'm greedy for grace and cramming for Christ. So when I find a lot of sin, I just jump right in the middle of it, because that's what God's grace is. And then he gives you talent. You fellas over there, come over here. I got something for you to go ahead. Oh, yeah. Your vocabulary is shot. I got it shot for you and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Okay. Flesh. Concerning zeal, verse 6, persecuting the church. That's what zeal will do for us. It causes us to be so religious we'll lose our mind. Touching the righteousness which is in the law, blameless. Ceremonial law, he was right on. But what things were gained to me, those I counted loss for Christ.